Hello, we're recording this the day after the English language leaders debate, and I'm pleased to be joined by Andrew Enns, the Executive Vice President with Leger. Great to have a pollster here to talk about what unfolded last night. And Leger, of course, did a poll recently looking at how Canadians feel about the leaders on a number of characteristics, ranging from leadership to energy, their energy level. I'm very interested to learn more about those results and whether Andrew believes the leaders played to those strengths or weaknesses and how they did during the debate. So welcome, Andrew.
Great to be back with you, Harold.
Yeah, I take it you had a chance to watch the debate last night then?
Yeah, I did. There was a couple times I had to check back in on that pretty exciting tennis match, but no, it was
exactly.
It's good debate.
Yeah, I find myself telling people, don't tell me what happened in the match. I've recorded it. I got to watch it later. What amazing tennis match for sure. So that question that you posed to people around attributes was sort of from what you've heard, read, seen during the campaign, what has surprised you about each of the leaders? And so maybe we could start with Justin Trudeau in that regard. Two characteristics that topped the list, unfortunately for Mr. Trudeau, was that he's out of touch with the concerns of ordinary Canadians and that he's a weak leader at 30 and 22%. His best attributes were that he takes a balanced approach and that he has an appealing plan, but those are down around 10, 12%. Were there moments last night where he might have improved on some of these negative feelings?
I think I would say partially, Harold. The format of the debate was a bit of a tough one for him at times because he took it from a number of the parties in terms of some criticisms and didn't always have sort of that opportunity to provide a strong kind of rebuttal to some of those. But that said, I thought he was fairly forceful. He was fairly, aggressive at times in terms of putting forth his view of the Liberal government record over the 6 years, and in fact taking on some of the challenges from Mr. O'Toole and Mr. Singh. So I think potentially on the weak leader, I think he flexed, he flexed a little bit of, his elbows a little bit there. I think where he will still have had some problems. I would imagine just in terms of some of the criticisms he took and some of the shortcomings that some are saying about his government.
He has that handicap in that he's a incumbent seeking re-election, so you're always a target for your record, and we saw a lot of that last night for sure. Yeah. on a number of fronts. And we look at Mr. O'Toole again. When we look at the poll, respondents again had two negative attributes for him at the top: that his party's ideas are not what Canada needs now, and he's not someone I can relate to. On the positive side, they weren't as high as negatives, I guess, as Mr. Trudeau, like 18, 19%. Positively speaking, again, his most positive ratings were down around 11, 14%, and very similar to Mr. Trudeau's. So right. Do you think he played to any of those strengths or weaknesses last night?
Well, and I think it's what we talked about even, at the very beginning where Aaron O'Toole was probably one of the more unknown leaders, next to, I would probably say, the Green leader, Miss Paul. But so Aaron O'Toole had this opportunity though, where he was going to get a lot of attention, and could he take advantage of that? And we saw at the outset of the campaign that he got a good clean launch, and he was able to, and it showed in the polling numbers that he was able to. His approach and demeanor, he came across clearly to voters, and I think some voters were impressed. When I look back at the debate last night, I think Aaron O'Toole was the calmest and most measured. Now, he wasn't under constant attack, unlike, say, Mr. Trudeau. I think Mr. Trudeau would have liked to have been a bit more one-on-one with Aaron O'Toole, but that's with 5 people in the debate. It's not always going to happen. So I think Aaron O'Toole did present reasonably well in the sense of being, he got his platform points across. He was able to speak to his plan for economic recovery in Canada and his focus on jobs. And I think he'll be happy about that. And I think so from the standpoint of this debate, where I think for Aaron O'Toole, one of his goals going in was not to get caught up in any sort of, traps or policy areas that he didn't want to spend a ton of time talking about. He avoided those, and I think he, quite frankly, will will feel reasonably good. No home runs. I think he took some hits, but I think, quite frankly, he'll feel that the Canadians who tuned in last night and got a chance to see him would see someone who seemed fairly measured, made reasonable sense. You could argue with the politics, and not everybody would be of that persuasion, but I think he would have presented reasonably well. Certainly in comparison, probably to the Prime Minister, who was a bit more aggressive and got a bit more agitated at times.
Yeah, I just say he was under far greater attack than O'Toole, but that
right.
And it was a bit of a different format. But so Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, very different story based on your poll. Like, he actually has strong attributes that are at the
right.
positive attributes at the top, with his energy and enthusiasm at 22% and his ability to understand people at 17%. His negatives tend to be for not someone I can relate to, or a plan that really isn't what Canada needs now. So more of a policy side of things, I would think, at 14-15%. So slightly higher negatives, but around the same as O'Toole in terms of percentages, and Mr. Trudeau, but much stronger on the positive side. So again, did you see that energy from him last night that people appreciate, and his relatability?
Well, I think Jagmeet Singh probably feels pretty good about how things went for himself last night. I think he solidified that option, that progressive option that he feels he's benefiting a bit from with Liberal vote and maybe even Green Party vote that's starting to feel that maybe their party, their ballot preferences in the past might not be the best one this time, and he had the chance to really put out his very progressive, very left of center, platform positions. He got a chance to do that. He also, had an opportunity for some very clear exchanges with the Prime Minister on some big progressive issues like climate change and the Indigenous reconciliation file. Yeah. And I thought, by and large, he probably did well. I will say, and you touched on it, Harold, in terms of when we looked at our Leger polling last week, where Mr. Singh and the NDP are vulnerable is some of the details of their policies and plans. I think that their goals and their ambitions are quite good, but I think the details and some of the costing and some of the implications is a little thin, and you saw the Prime Minister take advantage of that on the climate change, where he juxtaposed what experts say about the Liberal plan versus the NDP plan.
A versus the F, yes.
A versus the F, and I think that's where ultimately, that's where the Prime Minister may have won some points, and will get some people thinking a little bit about. The NDP has an aspirational kind of plan, but it might not be very realistic. And the Liberals, even though their record's not great on delivering, they may still have the most realistic plan on some of those important policies for progressive voters.
It did seem that for much of the night that Singh and Trudeau were going at each other, after each other, and then other times it was Trudeau and O'Toole going after each other. So they're chasing each other's votes in a sense.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure that's the case, and again, and that's what makes it challenging. And we talked about it even earlier in some of our other discussions, where the Liberals, by not getting off to that great start and driving the debate, they got caught in a situation of having to fight a campaign on two fronts, and you both O'Toole and Singh are feeling they're gaining some ground at the Liberal expense, and that's created a challenge for the Liberals, because campaigns are hard enough as it is when you're fighting for one front, but with two opponents it can be a bit more challenging.
But Green leader Anna May Paul was not part of your poll on leader characteristics, but we know she's fighting for her seat, for a seat in Toronto that is a Liberal stronghold right now. She managed to get a couple of good jabs in last night on the Prime Minister, particularly over the government's response to sexual assault of women in the military, and she invoked the name of 3 MPs who had left his caucus, including Jody Wilson-Raybould, whose name came up like 3 times, I think, last night.
Yeah, I'm sure the Prime Minister wasn't thrilled.
No, I could tell by the look on his face, and they all clearly know she has a book coming out on September 14th. What do you think Ms. Paul was trying to accomplish last night?
Well, I think, again, this was a terrific opportunity for her to try to demonstrate to Green Party voters out there who are tuned in that the party does have a leader, does have a strong leader, and who she is. I think, not to say that she didn't do well in the French language debate the night before, but I think the viewership would have been a little bit more isolated in terms of prominently out of Quebec. So this was her big chance. Quite frankly, I thought she did quite well. I thought she did the best in terms of introducing herself and talking about her background and who kind of what makes her who she is in terms of some of her background and upbringing. She was generally, well spoken. She played the conciliatory, kind of the peacemaker, kind of role. That's not uncommon for, Elizabeth May used to do that as well. And then she also played played up a bit the fact that she was the only woman on the stage, and that sometimes these men don't always understand what women need. And you're right, she was. So she was eloquent at times, I thought, and she was also fiery. And you touched on a couple of those exchanges, and I think in some respects she may have caught a few people off guard a little bit in some of that, where she really went after certainly the exchange on the feminism and sexual assault. She really took on Mr. Trudeau quite directly, and then also got into it quite directly with Mr. Blanchet on systemic racism. And I can tell you that's made some waves in Quebec, even echoing right? as we speak now. It's a bit of the talk of the town. So certainly, what it means, hard to predict. I mean, they don't have much of an organization. No. It's really been under siege. So that's probably unfortunate. Did a lot of people in Toronto Centre tune into the debate and are going to be swayed? I'm not sure, but maybe it's buoyed some of her volunteers and some of those folks to say, let's really try to get, Annamie Paul into the Parliament, because we think she can make a difference if she gets there.
How does that issue of discrimination, how does that play then in Quebec? Who benefits from her exchange?
Well, it's interesting, because going into that debate, we obviously had a bit of a surprise announcement from the Premier's office there, Monsieur Legault, who basically came out and said the party to vote for, if you're a Quebecer, a Quebec nationalist, is the Conservatives, is Mr. O'Toole. He's one that we can work with more than Mr. Trudeau, more than Mr. Singh, more than Paul, and more than Mr. Blanchet. So that probably shook things up, and so now suddenly you've added back in sort of like Mr. Blanchet was very animated with respect to the systemic racism, and I don't know if you saw his post debate exchange with the reporters, but holy, he was fired up. And so this issue may put some oxygen into his campaign for sure. I'm not 100% sure, Harold, who at the end of the day benefits on this. Because now we get into some vote splits, but it's one that's going to be interesting to watch, and I would suspect that our polling over the weekend may be interesting to see if there's been some movement in Quebec.
Quebec for sure. What else will you be looking for in that weekend polling?
Well, obviously, I think I said to you last time we talked that I felt this week was a bit of like moving day, and that people needed to position themselves for that last week. And we saw the Liberals make some move the previous week, the weekend, and we saw them close the gap and come up a few points in a number of polls. The Conservatives still look like they're holding a slim lead, or it's very, very close. I'll be curious to see if there's been any additional movement or if things have locked in. If they've locked in, then this is really coming down to a ground game. The leaders are just going to make a last pitch effort to, we talked about sort of the tour and where they're going to be going. Last time we spoke, if one of the parties has made some advances, then you'll see some additional advertising probably pushed to try to shake back some voters. So it's momentum now. Who's got it? It's a tough one to tell.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, did you think there was a winner last night?
Well, I mean, I looked at the debate and I said, so overall I thought, look, Miss Paul, out of the 5 in the grand scheme, probably did well in terms of accomplishing what she wanted to do. But I looked at the 2 things, and you touched on it already before, Harold, the debates within the debate, Mr. Trudeau and Mr. O'Toole, those two are that's the heavyweight fight for the prize. And I thought out of that one that Mr. O'Toole probably came out ahead on those exchanges. I think Mr. Trudeau needed, Mr. O'Toole, he needed to stay out of trouble, and I think he did. He presented himself reasonably well, and I think he did. Mr. Trudeau needed to get some body blows in on Mr. O'Toole. He needed to undermine the Conservative platform. He needed to kind of undermine the leadership of Erin O'Toole. He had some good, I will say, I mean, the Prime Minister had a couple of good shots in terms of, can't get his caucus vaccinated and can't get his caucus degree. I don't know. Those aren't new revelations, and I don't know if they hold that much currency in terms of Mr. O'Toole personally. And so I think on that score, I think Mr. O'Toole probably did well. The other debate within the debate for me was between Jagmeet Singh and Mr. Trudeau for sort of the hearts and minds of the progressive voters that might be second guessing the support they've had with the Liberals. And I think on that one, I think in the end of the day, the Prime Minister may have helped himself a little bit last night by exposing some weaknesses in sort of the policy framework that the NDP are trying to put together,
the lack of a costed platform.
That's right. The lack of some details and where this may fall short. It's possible he may have done some effort, some work there to try to stem that. Although there were some tough exchanges for the Prime Minister in terms of the record, and that's the challenge of a 6-year incumbent going at it. It's you've got some baggage.
Right. All right. Well, I can't wait till our conversations next week, and we'll have some fresh polling data. And heading into, I can't believe it's almost over.
It's coming down to that, yes, for sure. And I think we've got a fairly large BC poll coming out, so we'll be able to really get into. And as I say, that BC is going to make or break, I think, some governments as we tune in on election night.
Well, that would be nice to see for a change, to have it decided by BC. All right. Thanks as always, Andrew. Appreciate your insights.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye, Harold.